Pregnant wife slaps billionaire husband at his wedding, then exposes his darkest secret. The golden chandeliers cast a warm glow over the grand hall. This was the wedding of the year. Billionaire Zane Blackwood was about to marry Sophia Devereaux, the air thick with luxury and celebration. Outside, Amelia Monroe stood frozen at the entrance. Her breath was shallow, her heart beat a wild drum in her chest. She pressed a trembling hand against her swollen belly, her fingers digging into the fabric of the dress she had borrowed, one too thin for the cold night. She had been standing there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the towering doors that separated her from the man inside, the man who had left her for dead. Her reflection in the glass caught her off guard. Hollow cheeks, pale skin stretched too tightly over sharp bones, lips cracked from dehydration. She barely recognized herself, but her eyes still burned with fury. A soft ripple of movement from inside her womb grounded her, a tiny reminder of why she was here. Her baby, the child who had survived the impossible with her, the child whose father was just a few feet away, ready to kiss another woman like Amelia, had never existed. She wasn't supposed to be alive, and he wasn't supposed to be celebrating. She inhaled sharply, steadying herself. Now, gripping the handle with every ounce of strength left in her body, she shoved the heavy doors open. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The music came to a screeching halt. The officiant, who had just been reciting vows, turned toward the entrance, his mouth slightly agape. Every single head in the room swiveled toward her, eyes widening in shock, in horror, in confusion. And on the altar, standing tall in his perfectly tailored suit, was Zane. His lips were just inches from Sophia. His hands were lightly resting on her waist, poised to seal his union with the woman who came from wealth, power, and prestige, the woman he had chosen over Amelia. Zane's face paled, the color draining so fast it was as if he had seen a ghost, his jaw tightening so visibly that even the guests closest to him noticed, his entire body locked up, rigid and unreadable. But his eyes betrayed him. No, this wasn't possible. He had left her for dead. She was supposed to be gone. A slow murmur began spreading through the guests. Who is that? Is she pregnant? Sophia turned to Zane, confusion and a flicker of unease on her face. Zane? But Zane didn't answer. He was still staring at her, at Amelia, at the woman he had tried to erase from existence. Amelia stepped forward, her legs weak, but her fury unshaken. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the silent hall. She didn't hesitate, didn't slow down, and when she reached him, she slapped him across the face. The sound cracked like thunder in the suffocating silence. Gasps erupted. Someone let out a small scream. Sophia took a step back, eyes wide in disbelief. Zane's head snapped to the side, his face jerking from the sheer force of the impact. Red bloomed across his cheek. The murmurs exploded into chaos. Amelia finally spoke, her voice clear, unwavering, and laced with venom. Miss me, darling? Amelia Monroe had never been the kind of girl who believed in fairy tales. Love in her world was not grand gestures or whirlwind romances. It was quiet, steady, and most of all, rare. At 25, she had mastered the art of making do with what she had. Her apartment, a tiny space above a laundromat, rattled every time someone used the dryers below. The walls were too thin, the water pressure was awful, and in the winter, she had to wrap herself in layers just to stay warm. But it was hers. She had been raised by a single mother who did everything she could to provide, even when times were rough. Amelia grew up watching her mother work long hours, doing everything from waiting tables to cleaning houses, just to make ends meet. But despite the struggle, there was warmth in their home, love, even when there wasn't much else. And so Amelia learned to work hard, to be independent. She didn't believe in love stories where a mysterious stranger waltzed in and changed everything. But then she met him. It started like any other day. The first time Zane Blackwood saw her, she was wiping down a table near the window, strands of dark hair slipping from her messy bun, eyes focused on her work. There was nothing extraordinary about her at first glance. Just another cafe worker in a cheap apron, moving through the daily grind. But something about the way she carried herself caught his attention. The quiet determination, the way she barely looked up when customers walked in, never lingering for attention, never trying to impress. She wasn't like the women he knew, the ones who draped themselves in luxury, who spoke in carefully measured tones, who watched him with hunger in their eyes, knowing exactly who he was and what he could offer. No, she had no idea, and that was what intrigued him. Zane wasn't used to being ignored. In his world, people either feared him or wanted something from him. But she moved past his table like he didn't exist, her focus elsewhere, her mind probably filled with thoughts that had nothing to do with him. He found himself watching her, studying the way her fingers absent-mindedly tapped against the tray she carried, the way she bit her lip in concentration when scribbling down orders. She was different, not in an obvious way, not in a way that screamed for attention, but in a way that made him pause. So he returned the next day, and the day after that, always at the same table by the window, always with a cup of black coffee, never making a move, just observing, waiting. It took her a while to notice him, but when she finally did, it wasn't the way he expected. "You always take the longest shifts, don't you?" he remarked casually one evening, watching as she wiped down the counter. Amelia barely glanced at him. "That's called having a job," she said flatly, tossing the rag into a bucket. "You should try it sometime." A slow smirk tugged at his lips. Sharp, witty. "Maybe I will," he mused, leaning back against his chair. She didn't react, didn't even acknowledge the playful glint in his eyes. She simply turned away, moving to the next task on her list. Zane had never been a patient man. If he wanted something, he took it. And yet, with her, he found himself waiting, curious to see what would happen if he let the chase unfold naturally. Over the next 2 weeks, he made himself a fixture at the cafe, his presence impossible to ignore. He didn't push, didn't flirt the way he normally would. He simply existed in her space, offering passing comments, asking small questions. He learned things about her without her realizing, how she always added cinnamon to her coffee, how she kept an extra pencil tucked behind her ear, how her sketchbook was never far from reach. And slowly, so slowly, he got under her skin. "You draw, don't you?" he asked one evening when the cafe had emptied out. Amelia hesitated. "What makes you say that?" He tapped his fingers on the counter. "I've seen you doodling on napkins when you think no one's looking." She flushed, caught. "That doesn't mean I'm any good." He tilted his head. "You ever think about doing it professionally?" She let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, and I also think about winning the lottery. Doesn't mean it'll happen." His eyes lingered on her, something unreadable flickering behind them. "You should believe in yourself more," she scoffed. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not," he admitted, leaning back, "but I know what it's like to want something badly and think you'll never have it." There was something about the way he spoke, like someone who had fought hard to be where he was. That night, when she went home, she found herself thinking about him, and slowly, without even realizing it, she started to let him in. Amelia didn't know when it started, when her eyes began seeking him out before she even realized what she was doing, when the sound of his voice, low and smooth like warm honey, became something she recognized even in a crowded room. When she started expecting him at his usual table, like a fixed part of the cafe, like the old clock on the wall that ticked steadily, reliably. She told herself it was nothing. He was just a customer, a stranger who spoke to her more than others did. But he wasn't just a stranger, was he? Zane Blackwood, the man who sat in the corner, watching her with an intensity that felt like it could peel away her layers, see inside her mind. The man who, despite his effortless confidence, never once looked down on her for working long shifts. He asked about her day, commented on her sketches when she wasn't looking, noticed when she was tired, and left unusually big tips when she seemed too drained to argue about it. It wasn't like her to be drawn to someone like him. He was a little too smooth, a little too charming in a way that set off alarms in her head. And yet, he never crossed the line, never made a move that would force her to acknowledge that something was building between them, until he did. One evening, when the cafe was just minutes away from closing, Amelia found herself wiping down the counter, exhausted from the long day. She hadn't noticed that he was still there, still watching. "You ever take a break?" Zane's voice broke through the silence. She huffed a laugh. "Breaks are for people who can afford them." Something flickered in his expression. "What if I told you that you could afford one tonight?" he said, standing up and adjusting the sleeves of his jacket. Amelia frowned. "What?" Zane pulled a set of keys from his pocket and dangled them lazily. "I'm kidnapping you for an hour," she snorted. "You realize that's the worst way to phrase that?" He grinned. "Probably." She should have said no. There was no reason to leave with him, no reason to trust him. But her feet hesitated when she turned toward the back room to grab her coat. "I'll be back," she called to her coworker before she could talk herself out of it. Zane opened the door for her without a word, guiding her toward a sleek black car parked just outside. The city stretched around them as he drove, the roads mostly empty this late at night. The radio hummed softly in the background, and for the first time in a long while, Amelia allowed herself to relax. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. Zane glanced at her, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You'll see." They drove for nearly 30 minutes, the bright lights of the city fading behind them, until the streets turned quieter. When he finally parked, Amelia realized they were near the waterfront, where the sky stretched endlessly over dark waves that shimmered under the moonlight. Zane stepped out first, moving around to open her door. "You do realize I have work in the morning," she teased, but there was no real complaint in her tone. He shrugged. "1 hour won't kill you." He led her toward a small dock where the wooden planks creaked softly beneath their steps. The air smelled like salt, crisp and cool. Amelia pulled her jacket tighter around her, but the chill wasn't unpleasant. I used to come here a lot, Zane said after a moment, leaning against the railing, before work took over my life. She studied him, realizing she knew so little about him. He was always a mystery, always holding something back. What changed? She asked. Zane exhaled, a small, knowing smile on his lips. Life. Amelia didn't press further. Instead, she let the silence settle, let the moment stretch between them without the need for words. Then, without thinking, she asked, "Why me?" Zane turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers in the moonlight. "Why not you?" She opened her mouth to respond, but the words never came, because in that moment, Zane reached out, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. It was the first time he touched her, and just like that, something shifted. After that night, nothing was the same. Zane was no longer just a customer. He became a part of her life, slipping into her routine so effortlessly that she didn't realize how much she had started to expect him. His presence, his voice, the way he made her feel like she was something special. She still didn't know much about his life. He never spoke about his job, never flaunted wealth, never gave her a reason to believe he was anything more than what he seemed. A man who was too smooth for his own good, but not entirely impossible to trust. But he was impossible to resist. One night turned into two turned into weeks. Before she knew it, he was taking her on midnight drives just because she loved the city lights. He was showing up at the cafe unannounced, waiting for her shifts to end, so they could grab late-night food from the cheap diner down the street. She didn't ask for anything, and yet, he gave her pieces of himself. Small, careful pieces that made her fall, and she fell hard. It wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to care. But how could she not? When he made her laugh when she was exhausted, when he listened to her talk about her art like it mattered, when he kissed her for the first time in the quiet corner of the cafe after hours, tasting like black coffee and stolen time, Zane Blackwood wasn't just a man anymore. He was hers, or at least that's what she thought. What she didn't know? She was never meant to be anything more than a fleeting distraction. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond the rooftop, flickering like tiny promises against the darkened sky. The air was crisp, carrying the distant hum of traffic, but up here, in their little world, everything felt still. Amelia sat on the ledge, her legs swinging slightly as she laughed at something ridiculous Zane had just said. Something about how she made the worst coffee he'd ever had, but how he kept coming back just to see her try. She nudged him with her shoulder, pretending to be offended, and he smirked in that way that always sent a shiver down her spine. "I'm just saying," he teased, eyes locked onto hers. "If art doesn't work out, don't bank on being a barista." She rolled her eyes, shaking her head, but she was smiling. Amelia tilted her head back, staring at the stars. "I used to dream about moments like this," she admitted softly. Zane glanced at her. "Yeah?" She nodded. "Not the fancy rooftop part, just simple things. Laughing with someone, feeling safe." Something flickered in his expression, something she couldn't quite name. He reached out, took her hand, and before she could even register what was happening, he said it, just like that. "Marry me." She froze, her pulse hammering in her ears. It wasn't a question. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't even wrapped in some grand romantic gesture. He said it like a fact, like a decision had already been made. Amelia turned to him, eyes wide. "You're serious?" Zane nodded, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "I've never been more sure of anything." Her heart was racing. She searched his face, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a joke, but he didn't. His expression was unreadable, intense, like he was waiting for something. For her. She swallowed hard. "Zane, He leaned in, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You said you wanted simple," he murmured. "What's simpler than this? Just you and me. No waiting, no overthinking, no overthinking." That was how he got her. She wanted to believe in love. She wanted to believe in him, and maybe a part of her did. He had always been there, showing up when she needed him most, making her laugh when she felt like crying, holding her like she was something precious. She had never wanted big, extravagant fairy tales. She just wanted someone who chose her, and he was choosing her. She exhaled shakily, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She could say no, she could walk away, but instead she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. Zane's lips curled into a slow smile before he pulled her in, his kiss deep, firm, possessive. She melted into it, unaware that she wasn't being cherished. She was being claimed. The chapel was small, tucked away on a quiet street, the kind of place where love didn't need an audience, only a promise. It was nothing extravagant, nothing out of a movie, just a simple space filled with the scent of old books and melted candle wax. And yet to Amelia, it was perfect. She stood at the entrance, hands trembling slightly as she smoothed down the fabric of her dress. It wasn't designer, not even new, just something she had picked out from a local boutique, simple and timeless. Zane was waiting for her at the altar, dressed in a crisp white shirt and black trousers. Just him, raw and unfiltered. He looked at her the way he always did, with that quiet intensity, like she was the only thing that existed in the world. Her heart ached with the beauty of it. The ceremony was brief, no elaborate speeches, no grand declarations, just quiet vows spoken in hushed tones, fingers entwined as they exchanged simple silver bands. For better or for worse, Zane murmured, sliding the ring onto her finger. Amelia swallowed hard. For better or for worse. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Zane kissed her, slow, deep, firm, as if sealing something unspoken. The guests, just a handful of close friends, clapped politely, their smiles warm, genuine. For a moment, Amelia let herself believe this was everything she had ever wanted. But then, small things began to prick at her senses. The officiant, an older man with a kind smile, treated Zane with an unusual level of deference, almost like he was afraid of offending him. In the back of the chapel, a group of well-dressed men lingered, whispering among themselves, their sharp gazes flickering toward Zane every so often. Their suits were sleek, their watches expensive, the kind of wealth that didn't fit in a place like this. Amelia caught Zane's eye as they turned to walk down the aisle. "Who are they?" she asked softly. He didn't pause, didn't flinch, just squeezed her hand. "Old acquaintances." She let it go. Later, as they stepped outside, the sun dipping low in the sky, a sleek black car waited at the curb. Its glossy exterior gleamed under the fading light, the kind of vehicle that belonged to someone important, someone untouchable. A chauffeur stood by the door, nodding respectfully as he opened it. Amelia frowned. "Since when do we have a driver?" Zane chuckled, guiding her inside. "Consider it a wedding gift." The leather seats were cool against her skin as she settled in beside him. As the car pulled away from the chapel, she glanced back one last time, watching as the men in suits lingered at the entrance, their eyes following them. Something about it unsettled her, but she shook it off. Zane was her husband now, and husbands didn't keep secrets from their wives, right? The first time Amelia noticed something was off, they were at a small bookstore downtown. She had just picked up a well-worn poetry collection, running her fingers along the fragile spine, when she saw the way the cashier looked at Zane. Not the usual glance women gave him, that mix of admiration and curiosity. This was different. A flicker of recognition, a second of hesitation, like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. Zane barely noticed. He handed over a bill, cash, always cash, and turned back to Amelia, smiling like nothing had happened. "Find something you like?" he asked. She did, but as they walked out, the moment stuck with her. Then there were his clothes. At first, she never thought much of them. He didn't dress like the rich men she had seen on TV, but his shirts always fit too well, the stitching too precise. His shoes were the kind that looked simple, but cost more than 3 months of her rent. Once she found a label tucked inside his jacket, custom tailored, Milan. "Good finds," he told her with a grin when she mentioned it. That was always his answer, good finds. And she had believed him. Amelia had never known this kind of happiness before, the kind that settled into her bones like warmth on a cold day. She woke up every morning tangled in Zane's arms, his steady breath against her skin, his warmth anchoring her in place. She would press her face into his chest, listening to the faint rhythm of his heartbeat, allowing herself the smallest indulgence, to believe this was real, that this was forever. Their mornings were slow, lazy. Sometimes she would cook breakfast while he leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her with a smirk, teasing her for putting too much sugar in his coffee. Other nights, she stayed up late waiting for him to come home. Sometimes he arrived with takeout in hand, pulling her onto the couch, eating straight from the boxes, telling her stories in that deep, low voice of his. Other nights he barely spoke, his mood distant, closed off. She never asked why. She thought she understood him. When he touched her, she felt wanted. When he kissed her, she felt cherished. In her mind, love wasn't grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was in the little things. The way he pulled her closer in his sleep, the way his fingers traced patterns absent-mindedly along her back, the way he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear when she was too lost in thought to notice. She believed in it, in them, but what she never saw, what she never wanted to see, was the way Zane's gaze had started to change. The way he watched her, not with longing, but with something else. A quiet detachment, an almost imperceptible shift. In his mind, the chase was over. She had been thrilling when she was an enigma, when she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. But now she was predictable. A woman who loved him too deeply, trusted him too blindly. And Zane Blackwood? He was never the kind of man who stayed. The bathroom light flickered softly as Amelia stood frozen, her breath shallow, the tiny plastic stick in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines. She blinked, her heart hammering in her chest. Was she seeing it right? She rubbed her eyes, looked again. 2 lines. Pregnant. A choked laugh bubbled in her throat, half disbelief, half awe. She hadn't expected this, hadn't planned for it. But as the realization settled into her bones, warmth spread through her, something fierce and protective and overwhelming. Her fingers brushed over her stomach, still flat, still unchanged. But suddenly everything about her world had shifted, and Zane, he would be there, wouldn't he? She imagined him holding their baby, his cold, sharp features softening into something unfamiliar. A father, a husband, a family. Her heart swelled. This was real. They were going to be a family. She laughed, pressing her hand against her mouth as emotions swirled inside her. Could she have ever imagined this moment? A year ago, she was serving coffee at a small cafe, dreaming of stability, of security, and now she carried life inside her. Their life. She needed to tell him. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and rushed out the door, the cold air stinging her flushed cheeks as she hurried down the street. Her fingers curled around the pregnancy test in her pocket, her grip tight like she was afraid the news might slip away. She barely noticed the honking cars, the glow of streetlights blurring past her as she took the familiar route home, their home. Zane would be surprised, maybe a little shocked, but he'd come around. He had always told her she was the only thing that made sense in his world, and now they would have something even stronger tying them together. Love, blood, a future. Her heart pounded harder as she reached their apartment, fumbling with the keys before pushing the door open. "Zane?" she called out, breathless, excitement laced in her voice. Silence. The apartment was dimly lit, the faint hum of jazz playing in the background. She stepped inside, scanning the space. His coat was draped over the back of a chair, his laptop open on the desk, a half-empty glass of whiskey beside it. He was home. A soft click of a door made her turn, and then he was there, standing in the doorway of the bedroom, his shirt unbuttoned at the top, sleeves rolled up as if he had just loosened his tie. He looked at her, brow slightly furrowed, as if surprised to see her so flustered. She didn't wait. "I have something to tell you," she blurted out, stepping forward, the excitement nearly suffocating her. Zane's expression didn't change, but he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossing. "Yeah?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out the pregnancy test, holding it up between them. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, voice trembling with happiness. A pause. Amelia barely notices the way the air shifts between them. She is too caught up in the moment, in the joy flooding her veins, in the images flashing through her mind. A tiny baby wrapped in a blanket, Zane's hands cradling their child. Quiet mornings filled with warmth and laughter. She presses a palm to her stomach, almost as if she can already feel the life growing inside her. Zane's hands rest on her shoulders, firm, steady, too steady. A beat passes, then another, and finally his lips curl into a smile, slow, calculated. "That's great news." The words sound right, but the way he says them, off. Slightly mechanical, rehearsed, but Amelia doesn't notice. She doesn't catch the flicker of something sharp in his gaze. Instead, she melts into his arms when he pulls her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We're going to have a family," she whispers against his chest, her voice trembling with happiness. Zane exhales through his nose, his chin resting lightly on her hair. His hand slides down to the small of her back, pressing her closer. A family. The word doesn't sit right in his mind. It feels foreign, like a chain tightening around his neck. A child? He hadn't planned for this. Amelia was never supposed to be permanent. She was a fleeting indulgence, something sweet and innocent in a world full of deception. He had enjoyed playing the role of the devoted husband, the man who made her believe in love. But now she was a liability, a complication. His mind is already working, calculating. She can't stay, but for now he keeps up the act. "Yeah, a family," he murmurs, his hand brushing over her stomach in what looks like affection. Amelia beams, holding on to him, completely unaware of the darkness settling behind his eyes. Over the next few weeks, things started to shift. At first, she convinces herself it's nothing, that maybe she's just being sensitive. After all, Zane has always been busy. He's an ambitious man. But something feels different now. It's in the way he barely looks at her when he walks through the door. How he no longer leans down to kiss her absent-mindedly, no longer pulls her into his arms just because. It's the way his phone buzzes more than usual, and how he always turns away to answer it. "You've been working a lot," she says one night, her voice careful, measured. She sits beside him on the couch, her legs curled under her, one hand resting on the slight swell of her belly. Zane barely glances up from his phone. "Big projects." A familiar answer, dismissive. She exhales slowly, trying not to let it sting. "I feel like we barely see each other." A sigh, short, clipped. His fingers tighten around his phone before he places it face down on the coffee table. "You're imagining things." But she isn't. She watches him closely, searching his face, looking for the warmth that used to be there. It's been weeks since he traced lazy patterns on her back as they lay in bed. Weeks since he reached for her hand without thinking. Since he whispered something teasing in her ear just to make her laugh. And now when she touches his arm, he tenses. When she speaks, it takes him a second too long to respond. She swallows hard, forcing a smile. Maybe I just miss you. He finally looks at her then, his expression unreadable. For a moment she thinks she sees something soften in his eyes, a flicker of the man she fell in love with. But then, his phone buzzes again. I have to take this, he mutters, already pushing off the couch, already walking away. Amelia watches as he disappears into his office, closing the door behind him. Her hand drifts to her stomach. She isn't imagining it. Something has changed. She just doesn't know why. Zane swirled the amber liquid in his glass, watching the ice melt as he sat in the dim glow of his office. He had built his life on power, on control, every move calculated. So why did it feel like he was losing control now? Amelia. She was never supposed to be permanent. At first, she had been refreshing, unlike the women he was used to. She didn't chase after his wealth, didn't try to impress him with fake charm or desperate ambition. She was pure, untouched by the world he navigated so effortlessly, and he had wanted her. Not for love, not for forever, just to have her. But now she was becoming an anchor. A weight wrapped around his neck, pulling him down. His grip tightened around the glass as he exhaled sharply. He should have seen this coming. The moment she told him she was pregnant, he knew this would change everything. Knew she would expect something from him. Commitment, fatherhood, a life he never intended to give her. He drained the last of his whiskey and set the glass down with a sharp clink. He had found something better. Sophia Devereaux, wealthy, untouchable, the kind of woman who belonged in his world. Her father owned half the real estate in the country. Her family name carried weight in circles even Zane hadn't broken into yet. She was his next move, his ticket to something bigger. And Amelia was a mistake, one he needed to erase. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, already thinking, already planning, how to get rid of her, how to do it cleanly, how to make sure she never came back. Zane adjusted the cuffs of his crisp white shirt as he stepped into the sleek, candlelit restaurant. It was the perfect place for him to be exactly who he needed to be tonight. Sophia was already waiting, her elegant posture making her stand out, even in a room full of the wealthy elite. She turned when she saw him, flashing a practiced, sultry smile. You're late, Zane smirked, sliding into the seat across from her. Business doesn't wait. She lifted an eyebrow, but there was amusement in her eyes. Of course. You're a very busy man, Mr. Blackwood. He studied her, the designer dress that fit her perfectly, the diamonds on her wrist that probably cost more than some of his company's smaller investments. Everything about her screamed power, prestige. She was a Devereaux after all, and he knew exactly what she was looking for. A man who matched her status, someone who could hold his own in her world, and he could. Because in this world, Zane Blackwood was a single, unattached billionaire. Across the city, Amelia sat on the couch, her feet tucked under her, staring at her phone. She had called him twice. No answer. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she sent a simple text. Are you still at the office? A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. Zane. Late meetings. Don't wait up, she sighed, rubbing a hand over her belly. Lately, late meetings had become his favorite excuse, but she didn't question it. He had always worked long hours. The missed calls, the quiet conversations behind closed doors, the way he had recently changed his phone password, when before, he never cared if she glanced at his screen. It gnawed at her. Who keeps calling you? She had asked him a few nights ago, when his phone buzzed for the third time in an hour. Zane barely looked up from his laptop. Investors. She frowned. At midnight? You want me to drop everything and focus on you instead? His tone was smooth, but there was an edge to it. Amelia immediately felt guilty. No, She shook her head. Never mind. Zane stepped closer, cupping her chin with his fingers, tilting her face up. His touch was gentle, but his eyes were unreadable. I'm working for us, Amelia. For our future. She swallowed, nodding. I know. But across the city, Zane wasn't working. He was lifting his glass in a quiet toast with Sophia Devereaux, watching her laugh at something he had just said, feeling the weight of his double life settle comfortably around his shoulders. Lying to Amelia? It was getting easier. Amelia had grown used to the silence, the cold, empty bed at night, the barely there glances Zane gave her before slipping out the door, his mind clearly elsewhere. The dinners she ate alone, staring at her untouched plate, wondering when everything had started to fall apart. She told herself it was just stress, work, responsibilities, the pressure of becoming a father. He would come around. He had to. But there were moments, quiet and cruel, where she felt the undeniable truth settling into her bones like a sickness. Zane was slipping away from her, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't hold on to something that no longer wanted to stay. Then, one evening, he came home early. Amelia nearly dropped the glass she was washing when she heard the sound of his key turning in the lock. He never came home this early anymore. Before she could process the moment, he stepped into the kitchen, holding a bouquet of pale pink roses, her favorite. She stared at them, then at him, wide-eyed, unsure if she was hallucinating. "For you," he said smoothly, a soft smile tugging at his lips, the kind of smile he used to give her all the time, the one that made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. Amelia hesitated before taking them, the scent of fresh petals filling her senses. "What's this for?" "I know I've been distant," he admitted, stepping closer. "Work's been a nightmare. I've been so wrapped up in everything that I forgot to take care of what really matters." He touched her cheek, tilting her face up toward his. "You." The simple word sent warmth rushing through her chest. In just a second, all the doubts melted away. She swallowed, voice small. "I thought maybe you weren't happy anymore." His jaw tightened, but his smile never wavered. "I am, and I will be even more once the baby's here." He rested a palm against her stomach. Hope surged through her, fragile but powerful. Maybe she had been overthinking. Maybe he had just been overwhelmed, drowning in stress, unable to communicate. Maybe this was the beginning of things going back to how they were before. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "I missed you." "I know," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "And I promise, I'm here now." That night, he stayed by her side. He held her when she curled into him, whispered things that made her laugh, brushed his fingers along the curve of her belly, as if he really meant every word. But the truth was simple. Zane Blackwood was not staying. He was setting her up for the fall. Amelia had been lost in thought all day, her mind cycling through every moment of warmth Zane had given her recently, clinging to the hope that they were finally returning to what they once had. He had been more attentive, more present. She wanted to believe it was real, that he was trying, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered doubts she wasn't ready to acknowledge. Zane, seated across from her, took a slow sip of wine before setting his glass down with a casual smile. "You're quiet tonight," he noted, watching her carefully. Amelia lifted her gaze, startled for a moment before forcing a smile. "Just tired." His fingers drummed against the table, thoughtful. "I was thinking, maybe we should take a trip." She blinked, confused. "A trip?" "Yeah," he said smoothly. "Just the two of us, before the baby comes. Somewhere peaceful." Her heart gave a hopeful lurch. Zane had never been the kind of man to suggest spontaneous getaways. "Really?" she asked, voice soft, hesitant, as if saying it aloud would make it disappear. "Of course," he said with an easy smile, stroking his thumb over her knuckles. "You deserve a break. We both do." Amelia inhaled slowly, trying to calm the rush of emotions bubbling inside her. This was good. This meant something. Maybe she had been wrong to worry. Maybe his distance had truly been about work, about stress, and now he was making it up to her. "Where would we go?" she asked, a small hopeful smile tugging at her lips. "Somewhere beautiful," he murmured. "I'll handle everything. You won't have to lift a finger." Her chest tightened. He was looking at her like he used to, like she was the most precious thing in his world. She squeezed his hand. "That sounds perfect." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her fingers. The moment they arrived at the secluded resort, Amelia felt the weight on her chest loosen, just a little. The air smelled of salt and wildflowers, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond the cliffs where their private villa stood. The staff greeted them with warm smiles, leading them into a space that looked like something out of a dream. Soft white linens, a sprawling terrace, a bathtub carved into stone overlooking the sea. Zane had outdone himself. "It's beautiful," Amelia breathed, stepping onto the balcony, the ocean breeze ruffling her dress. Zane stood behind her, hands resting lightly on her waist. "I told you," he murmured against her ear. "Only the best for you." She closed her eyes, letting herself melt into his touch, letting herself believe. The first 2 days felt perfect. They walked barefoot along the beach at sunset, waves lapping at their ankles. He pulled her into the water once, laughing when she squealed at the cold. That night, he ordered dinner to their villa, lighting candles as they ate beneath the stars. He was attentive, gentle, warm. He brushed his fingers over the curve of her belly, kissed her temples, whispered about the future. One evening, curled up against him in the oversized bed, she traced lazy circles over his forearm. "This was exactly what we needed," she whispered, pressing her cheek against his chest. "I love you, Zane." His fingers stroked through her hair. A pause. Then softly, "I know." She didn't notice the way his eyes stayed open long after hers had closed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't feel the absence of warmth in the way his fingers trailed down her spine. Zane, because for Amelia, this moment was real. The last night at the resort felt almost magical. Everything felt perfect, too perfect. Zane poured her a glass of juice, his movements smooth, practiced. He handed one to Amelia, watching as she took it without hesitation. "To us," he said, his voice deep, steady. "To our future." Amelia smiled, her heart warming at the rare tenderness in his gaze. She clinked her glass against his, letting the moment wrap around her like a lullaby. She took a sip. The taste was sweet, but something about it felt off. Maybe it was the warmth of the evening, or the exhaustion from the long day spent walking on the beach. But as she set the glass down, her head felt suddenly heavy. A slow fog crept into her limbs, her vision blurring at the edges. She blinked, trying to shake the strange sensation. "Zane!" Her voice felt distant, not her own. "I don't feel well." She reached out, grasping for his hand. He caught her, guiding her gently toward the bed. His touch was firm, reassuring, but his face was unreadable. "Shh," he whispered, brushing her hair from her face. "Rest, love." Her limbs refused to cooperate. The room spun, shadows merging into one another. Panic bloomed somewhere deep inside her, but it was fleeting, drowned by the pull of sleep. Her last thought before the darkness swallowed her was that something was very, very wrong. A dull ache pulses at the back of Amelia's skull as she slowly drifts back to consciousness. Her body feels impossibly heavy, as if she's been submerged underwater, her limbs refusing to obey her. Her throat is parched, her lips cracked. The first thing she notices is the silence. The soft hum of the ocean, which had lulled her to sleep, is gone. No distant sounds of waves crashing against the shore. No gentle breeze slipping through the curtains. Instead, the air is eerily still, pressing in on her like an unseen force. Something is wrong. Her fingers clutch at the sheets, but they feel different. The fabric beneath her is rough, unfamiliar. She forces her eyes open, blinking against the dim morning light. The villa is gone. She's lying on a thin mattress, in an unfamiliar room. Panic coils in her chest. She pushes herself up on shaky arms, her heart pounding erratically. The bed is cold. The room is bare. No sign of Zane. No sign of their things. Her phone, her purse, her ID, gone. Her breath catches as she stumbles out of bed, her legs weak beneath her. A wave of dizziness hits her, making the walls tilt for a second. She grips the side of the mattress, forcing herself to focus. She reaches for the door, flinging it open, and steps outside, only to be greeted by the most chilling sight she's ever seen. Nothing. No villa, no people, no roads, just endless, unforgiving wilderness stretching out before her. The world around her is eerily empty. Trees loom in the distance, their dark silhouettes stark against the gray sky. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and salt, but there is no movement, no sign of civilization. Her breath comes in short, shallow gasps as she spins around, searching for something, anything that makes sense. But all she finds is isolation. Her stomach twists as a horrifying realization sets in. He left her. Zane left her here, alone, and she has no way out. Zane grips the steering wheel, his fingers tapping idly against the leather as the road stretches endlessly ahead of him. The early morning sky is painted in soft hues of pink and gold, but he doesn't notice. He doesn't care. His mind is already elsewhere, far away from the isolated cabin he left behind. He doesn't glance in the rearview mirror. There's no need. It's done. Amelia Monroe is nothing more than a memory now, a fleeting mistake he has erased. He exhales slowly, rolling his shoulders back as he adjusts his cufflinks. His suit jacket is draped neatly in the passenger seat, and beside it, a velvet box containing a diamond ring, one that will soon belong to Sophia Devereaux. Sophia, the woman who actually matters, the woman who is worthy of standing beside him, a far cry from the naive, foolish girl he left behind. His phone vibrates against the console, breaking the silence. He doesn't have to look to know who it is. Sophia. He presses the speaker button, his voice smooth and controlled. "Good morning, darling." "Morning," she purrs, her voice as polished as ever. "Did you handle your business?" Zane smirks, his fingers tightening around the wheel. Completely. No hesitation, no guilt. Sophia hums in satisfaction. "Good. My father wants to discuss finalizing the engagement this evening." Finalizing. As if his life with Amelia had never existed at all. He flicks on his turn signal, merging onto the highway. "I'll be there soon. No one will find Amelia. No one will come looking. To the world, she was never his wife, and to him, she no longer exists." The world around her felt endless. Amelia's vision blurred, a dull haze stretching across the barren landscape. Her body was screaming, every muscle trembling with exhaustion, every step she took sending sharp pain up her legs. Her lips were cracked, her throat dry, but she had stopped hoping for water hours ago, maybe days ago. She didn't know anymore. Time had lost meaning in this place, this cruel, empty nowhere that Zane had left her in. She didn't want to die here. One foot in front of the other, she forced herself forward. Her arms clutched her swollen belly, as if holding her child closer would somehow give her strength. The night air was freezing, biting through the thin dress she still wore, the same dress she had put on that last evening when she foolishly believed she and Zane were mending things. A bitter laugh bubbled in her chest, but never made it past her parched lips. A gust of wind howled through the wilderness, sending a shiver down her spine. Amelia's steps wavered, her knees threatening to buckle. No, not yet, just a little more. There had to be something, someone, but all she saw was darkness stretching endlessly in all directions, mocking her. A flicker of light. At first she thought she imagined it, a cruel trick of her desperate mind. But then, there, in the distance, headlights cutting through the night, a vehicle approaching, the low hum of an engine growing louder. Amelia's heart pounded. She tried to lift her arm, tried to wave, but her limbs were too weak, too heavy. The truck kept moving, the sound growing closer. The lights were blinding now, making her squint. Was it real? Was she finally going to be saved? Or was she already too far gone, hallucinating salvation that wasn't really there? The vehicle slowed. Tires crunched against the dirt as it came to a stop a few feet away. A door creaked open, followed by the heavy thud of boots against the ground. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, rough around the edges. His silhouette loomed against the headlights, casting shadows across his rugged features. His gaze landed on her, and something shifted in his expression. Not fear, not disgust, just concern. Jesus Christ. His voice was deep, steady. You need help. Amelia's lips parted, but no sound came. She could barely hold herself upright. She took a shaky step forward, then another, until her legs finally betrayed her. The world tilted as her body gave in, collapsing toward the ground. Strong arms caught her before she hit the dirt. Got you, the man murmured, his grip firm yet careful. He lowered her gently, pulling off his jacket and wrapping it around her shoulders. The warmth was almost shocking against her frozen skin. You're freezing. Amelia barely registered his words. Her head lolled against his chest as exhaustion swallowed her whole. For the first time in days, she let go, and everything faded to black. The scent of something warm and earthy filled the air. Wood smoke, maybe, mixed with the faint aroma of coffee. Amelia stirred, her body heavy, her mind sluggish, as if she were surfacing from the depths of a deep ocean. It was the first time in days, no, weeks, that she felt warmth, real warmth, against her skin. A blanket, thick and scratchy, lay over her, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness she had woken up to last time. She blinked, her gaze adjusting to the dim light of the room. It was small, simple, a single window with heavy curtains, a battered wooden table against the wall, and a small fireplace crackling in the corner. The flickering light cast shadows across the rough wooden floorboards, and everything about it felt safe, but unfamiliar. Where am I? She tried to sit up, a sharp ache shooting through her limbs, reminding her of the brutal days she had spent wandering that wasteland. A hand shot to her belly, her heart hammering. Was the baby okay? She closed her eyes, focusing, waiting. Then, there, a small flutter beneath her palm, weak but present. Relief crashed over her like a wave, but it wasn't enough to chase away the numbness spreading through her veins. You're awake. The deep, steady voice made her flinch. Her eyes darted toward the figure standing near the kitchen. The man, Mike, she vaguely remembered his name, was watching her carefully. He held a mug in one hand, steam curling from the rim, and a concerned expression settled across his rugged face. She swallowed, her throat dry. She should say something, but the words wouldn't come. Mike didn't press. He simply walked over, setting the mug on the small wooden nightstand beside her. Tea. It'll help. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she just stared at him, at everything. How had she survived? Why had she survived? Zane had left her to die. He had looked into her eyes, held her hand, whispered words of love, and all the while, he had been planning to discard her like nothing, like trash. Her fingers tightened against the blanket. Mike sat down on a worn-out armchair a few feet away, studying her. I found you passed out near the old dirt road, couple miles from where I was driving through. He leaned back, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Thought you were dead at first. Maybe I should have been. The thought flickered through her mind before she could stop it. He waited, giving her time to respond. When she didn't, he just exhaled quietly and shifted in his chair. You don't have to talk about it, but if someone did this to you, you should tell someone. The police, maybe. A laugh almost slipped out of her. It was dry, hollow. The police. As if the law would do anything against Zane Blackwood, as if the world even knew the kind of monster he was. She turned her head away, staring blankly at the cracks in the ceiling. Mike sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, but he didn't push. Instead, he stood and grabbed a folded pile of clothes from a chair in the corner. Figured you might want something clean to wear. Not much, but they'll do for now. He set them down beside the mug and took a step back. Take your time. You're safe here. Safe. The word felt foreign. She heard him walk toward the door, the soft creak of the wooden floor beneath his boots. Then, just as he reached for the handle, the low murmur of a television echoed from the next room. At first, it was just background noise, nothing more than static to her numb mind. But then, a name, a voice, a sentence that sent ice through her veins. Billionaire Zane Blackwood set to marry Sophia Devereaux in a highly anticipated wedding tomorrow evening. Her breath caught. No, it wasn't possible. Her hands trembled as she pushed the blanket aside, ignoring the stabbing pain in her limbs. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, every part of her body protesting the sudden movement. Mike frowned, stepping toward her. Hey, take it easy. She barely heard him. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she staggered toward the doorway, her fingers gripping the frame to keep herself upright. The screen flickered in the dimly lit room, a newscaster standing in front of an extravagant venue, floral arrangements towering behind her as she spoke with enthusiasm. The Blackwood Devereaux wedding is expected to be one of the most extravagant events of the year. A new image flashed on the screen. Zane, smiling, standing beside a woman who looked every bit the picture-perfect heiress, flawless, poised, draped in diamonds. Sophia Devereaux, his fiancée, his future, the life he had left her to die for. Amelia felt something deep inside her crack, splintering into sharp, unforgiving pieces. Her stomach churned, nausea twisting through her as she watched the screen, as the reporter spoke with the same empty enthusiasm all news anchors had when discussing the rich and powerful. The Blackwood Devereaux wedding is set to be one of the most extravagant events of the year, the woman chirped, standing in front of the grand venue, floral arrangements towering behind her. Sources say the guest list includes some of the biggest names in business and politics. She barely heard the rest. Zane was a billionaire, and he never told her that? How she could be so naive. Her hands trembled as she forced herself to move, gripping the edge of the small wooden table for support. Mike, who had been leaning against the doorframe watching her, straightened, his brow furrowing. You okay? His voice was careful. Amelia's nails dug into the wood. No, she wasn't okay. Zane Blackwood, the billionaire, thought she was dead. He had walked away, never looking back. He had left her to rot, to disappear, to be erased. And now, he was about to marry another woman, as if she had never existed. The betrayal tasted bitter in her throat. The rage was like fire in her veins. She sucked in a sharp breath, forcing her body to stop shaking. When she spoke, her voice was eerily steady. I need to get back. Mike's frown deepened. Back where? She lifted her gaze, steel-hard determination settling into her bones. To that wedding. Mike exhaled, running a hand over his jaw. Amelia, I don't know what's going on, but I need to go back, she interrupted, her voice firmer this time. I need to stop this. Mike studied her for a long moment. His dark eyes flickered with something. Concern, maybe. Curiosity. But he didn't press. Instead, he just let out a long breath. All right, he said, grabbing his truck keys off the counter. Let's go. And just like that, Amelia Monroe was done being the woman left behind. She was going back to finish what Zane started. The grand hall shimmered under the glow of extravagant chandeliers. A sea of high-profile guests sat in their pristine seats, all eyes fixed on the breathtaking sight before them. Zane Blackwood, standing at the altar, his hands gently cradling Sophia Devereaux's. The officiant's voice carried through the air, slow and deliberate, marking the final words before the vows were sealed with a kiss. You may now. The doors burst open. A loud, jarring slam cut through the ceremony like a thunderclap. Heads whipped around, murmurs and gasps rippling through the elegant crowd. And there, standing at the entrance, was Amelia Monroe, disheveled, hollow-cheeked, drenched in exhaustion but burning with rage. 7 months pregnant. Her breath was ragged, her chest rising and falling unevenly, but her legs carried her forward without hesitation. Step by step, past the horrified stares, past the whispers, past the wide-eyed shock of those who recognized her. She didn't stop, not until she stood in front of the man who had left her for dead, Zane Blackwood. For a single moment, everything fell into silence. He looked at her, his face draining of color, his entire body tensing as if he had seen a ghost. No, not a ghost. A reckoning. His lips parted, barely able to form a word. Hey, Amelia? She didn't let him say anything else. Her palm connected with his cheek in a loud, merciless slap. The sharp crack of the impact echoed through the room. Zane stumbled back slightly, his head snapping to the side, a stunned expression frozen on his face. A collective gasp filled the space, some guests standing in their seats, others too stunned to move. Sophia let out a confused, mortified noise, looking between Amelia and Zane with growing horror. The silence was deafening. Amelia's chest heaved, her palm still stinging from the force of the slap, but she didn't care. She lifted her chin, her voice like a blade slicing through the air. "Did you miss me, husband?" Amelia's words hung in the air like a thunderclap, rattling the pristine perfection of Zane Blackwood's carefully constructed world. "He tried to kill me." Gasps erupted from the guests, horrified murmurs rippling through the crowd. People turned to one another, their shocked whispers blending into a sea of disbelief. Zane stiffened. His fingers twitched, his lips parting slightly, but no words came out. His gaze darted around the room, as if searching for a way to regain control. Then, he did what he always did. He lied. This is insane," he scoffed, his voice uneven but forcefully calm. "She's delusional. I don't know what happened to her, but I had nothing to do with it." But Amelia wasn't done. She reached into her coat pocket, her fingers tightening around the papers inside. With one swift movement, she pulled them out and threw them onto the altar between them. Evidence. Medical reports detailing injuries sustained from her abandonment, a signed testimony from Mike, the man who found her, a DNA test confirming the child inside her was his. "Tell them, Zane," Amelia said, her voice steady, unwavering. "Tell them where I was for the past 2 months. Tell them why you left me, pregnant and alone, in the middle of nowhere." All eyes turned to him. Zane's jaw clenched, his carefully groomed mask of control cracked, just slightly. But before he could say anything, Sophia Devereaux stepped back, her hands trembling as she looked at Zane in disgust. "You told me you were never married," she said, her voice quiet but laced with betrayal. "Sophia." Zane reached for her, but she yanked her hand away. The massive diamond ring on her finger felt like poison against her skin. With a disgusted scoff, she ripped it off and threw it at his chest. "We're done." The moment the ring hit the ground, everything unraveled. Business partners, watching from the crowd, whispered among themselves, their expressions turning cold. A few of them pulled out their phones, sending messages. Deals were being reconsidered. A voice rang out from the front row, Zane's mother. She stood slowly, her face like stone. "You are no son of mine," she said, her voice carrying the weight of finality. Zane turned to her, panic flashing in his eyes. "Mother, wait!" But she was already walking away. Security stepped forward. The venue manager, once eager to accommodate the powerful billionaire, now looked at him with disgust. "Mr. Blackwood," the man said, voice clipped, "we're going to have to ask you to leave." Zane's breathing turned shallow. Everything, his fortune, his reputation, his entire empire, was crumbling before his eyes. And Amelia? She stood there watching, not with satisfaction, not with joy, just with the quiet, unwavering strength of a woman who refused to be silenced. As Zane took a final glance around the room, at the people who once worshipped him now looking at him with disdain, he did the only thing left to do. He turned and fled. The courtroom was silent as the judge's final ruling echoed through the grand chamber. Amelia sat still, her hands resting gently on the swell of her belly. She had fought hard for this moment, not for revenge, not for wealth, but for justice, for herself, for her unborn child. Zane sat across from her, jaw clenched, eyes dark with restrained fury. He had lost, legally, financially, and socially. His world had come crashing down, and no amount of power or influence could save him now. The settlement was ruled in Amelia's favor, more than she had expected, more than she had dared to hope for. A fair share of his assets, enough to build a new life, enough to turn her pain into something powerful. She walked out of the courthouse with her head high, stepping into the sunlight as the wind carried the weight of her past away. Mike stood by the car, waiting for her. He had been there through it all, through her recovery, through the late nights when nightmares kept her awake, through the moments when she thought she wouldn't be strong enough. "You did it," he said softly, opening the door for her. Amelia exhaled slowly, placing a hand over her stomach. "We did it." Months passed. Life moved forward. She used the money not to indulge in luxury, but to build something meaningful, something lasting, a foundation for women like her, women who had been discarded, hurt, and left to fend for themselves. A safe space, a place where no woman would ever feel alone the way she once had. It wasn't just about charity, it was about empowerment. And alongside it, she built something that was purely hers. An art studio, a publishing house for aspiring illustrators, a dream she had almost let slip away when she was struggling to survive. She filled it with color, with life, with stories that deserved to be told. Mike was always there, a steady presence, a friend who never asked for anything in return. He had become family in a way that Zane never had been. One evening, Amelia sat on the balcony of her new home, cradling her newborn in her arms. The baby's tiny fingers curled around hers, warm and fragile, a promise of a future that no longer felt uncertain. She looked down at her child and smiled softly. "We made it," she whispered. Far away, across the world, Zane lived in exile, no longer a king, no longer a name that carried power. He had money, yes, but he had nothing else. No empire, no allies, no love, only the bitter taste of his own downfall. Amelia never spared him another thought, because she had won, not just in court, not just against